Welcome to Filter Free. I'm your host, TL. We are back. Guess what? I told you guys when we returned, we were coming back better than ever. So, last time we saw you guys, we told you we were going to have 5 questions for you all to determine whether or not you're toxic, how you can self-identify toxicity. So, today, we are going to get into that. But before we do that, how are you guys doing? Glad to see all of you all. Let's go through everybody real quick. Let's start with Beacon. What's going on, Beacon? How's life? How they treating you?
Oh man, good. Crazy times. I'm actually working on a book, so hopefully within the next 4 to 6 months, you'll see that being released.
Okay, that's what's up.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what's up.
Things are good though. I'm blessed.
How's Kingdom Crew Clothing coming along?
Coming along well. So, building up some more, starting to get some sales now. Doing some more promotion and figuring out the next steps to keep it going.
All right, that's a bet.
Yeah,
Let's
man.
keep up the good work.
God is
Let's go
good.
to brother. All right, let's toss it over here to brother James. Mr. James.
James.
Let me unmute. Peace and blessings to everybody. I'm feeling great. I'm over here on the East Coast, getting the vibrations, getting some energy.
All right.
Some stimuli. And so I'm thankful. I'm actually here in my sister's apartment here in Jersey City, looking right now at the Holland Tunnel. And feeling fine. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking forward to getting back to LA in a couple weeks. And I'll probably be working at a gun range. I have a friend of a friend who's the owner of Redstone Firearms Ranch, and she needs some help. So I said, I got a few hours I can dedicate. I got a few hours I can go to Burbank and lend my services. So gun range time.
That's where I bought my gun
I'll be
from.
training folks. I'll be teaching folks how to shoot, get that grip together. I think Black folks should arm themselves.
Right.
Anyway, let's keep it moving.
Proud of you, brother. Congratulations.
Do y'all need
You over here having whole
do y'all need a chaplain to pray over? Do y'all need a chaplain to pray over people's aim? I can use some additional.
Anything's possible.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on over here to the R&B monk, Mr. Joaquin.
What up?
What's happening?
Yeah, ain't much, man. Enjoying life like always. I'm always enjoying life.
I mean, look, I'm going to ask you. You got a praise report to give? Like we see everybody else giving it up.
Oh yeah. I mean, other than the book, obviously I have a book out called Messages to Self that's selling pretty regularly. Getting new sales every week.
Yep.
I started a 12-week program that I'm gonna be pitching very soon. Just adding different pieces to it now to increase the value that I provide. And I also have a deck of I am affirmation cards coming out probably in the next couple months myself. So yeah, I'm just working on things to provide value to my fellow man, pretty much.
That's what's up. That's
dope.
Up. Okay, let's go ahead and toss it to Mr. Bluetooth.
It's a tough act to follow, bro. That Wad he's trying to make up for not having a question right now. He killing right now.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, what? Whoops. Man, I'm enjoying life like a mug, almost like it ain't no COVID, man.
That's what's up.
Like it's 1999.
Okay. All right. Any praise reports for you? Anything you can you
Well, I mean, I'm finally working on my own project. Like people have been asking me to do for 30 years. So,
Icon.
that's you unmuted just for that. Yeah, so that it's a lot of fun. It's a purge of a lot of things that I've made over the last 25 years that I've never done anything with.
Okay.
So it's a very enjoyable process, and I'm happy that people are. I hit up Harvey Mason Sr. today. He's gonna play drums on one of them, which is huge for anybody who knows who that is. Stevie Wonder.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna need him. Dr. Dre's helping me with the hip hop stuff, so it's just like.
Woo.
It's great. I'm glad I waited because I have access to none of that when I wrote this stuff. So it's, God's time.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, all right. Y'all ready to jump into this?
Why not?
How you doing, Bishop Jordan? How you doing?
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Listen, I can't complain. I am here. Y'all see the light? I'm glowing. My
I
forehead
think that's just a
was
wall.
shining.
I feel like that's just.
I mean,
I feel like that's just your
like,
wall. I feel like your wall
okay,
is
we
just
covered
freshly
that too.
painted.
I mean, I was going for the heavenly
I'm not
angelic,
sure that's a glory. I think that's just a wall. But
Listen,
go ahead.
don't try to block my grace, okay? Let me shine.
You're right.
All right, no. All in all, I'm good, man. Like I said, I was looking forward to just linking with you brothers, man. Like, you guys are necessary. You know what I mean? Y'all are just good for the spirit and good for the soul. So, I'm just really excited to be able to do this with you all, and I can't wait till we can actually get back face to face, so we can really vibe off each other and act a fool like only we can. So, yeah, man. Like, I will not complain. I'm great. So, y'all, let's go ahead and get this show started. So, last time we saw you, as we said earlier, we were talking about toxicity and just the various forms in our toxic series, and we said we decided to ask ourselves or try to figure out what questions we would ask ourselves to be able to determine whether or not we are toxic or have toxic traits. And this is to help those people who may not realize that they are toxic, people who when other people say it, they may not necessarily believe them, oh, you're being a hater, whatever. But in your quiet time, you at some point, you got to deal with yourself. If life ain't going the way you want it, you got to figure out what's causing these things. So as a unit, we decided, hey, let's figure out what we can do. Now, we had a very lofty goal, and that kind of didn't make a whole lot of sense because we would have probably about a year's worth of episodes off of 25 questions. So we're just going to knock it on down to, let's say, 4 or 5. So I would like to start with Beacon this week. What you got for us? What question? Oh, no, I'm sorry. What's up, Blue?
Thing?
Yeah.
So because we're in a time right now of buzzwords, like our culture right now is all about, ooh, that word makes me sound cool when I say it. So I'm going to say that all the time. And toxic is one of those words, like narcissist. Everybody figured out what a narcissist was last week. So now everybody says narcissist. It's one of those things. So I feel like before we go into whether you're toxic or not, we should define toxic and move from there.
Okay. So, okay, we could definitely redefine it. I was just, that's a good point. I should not have assumed that people have been rocking with us since episode 1, and here we are, 9-10 episodes in. That I'm sorry for thinking y'all been loyal since the beginning. Okay, so
for those of you who just tuned in,
for those of you, thank you for joining. This is a hell of a ride. No, Joaquin, I like the definition that you've given every time we get into it. So can you break us down with what toxic is, or your belief of what toxic is?
So the easiest way to define toxic, I would say, is out of integrity or imbalanced. Which that's like the simplest way I could put it, is out of integrity or imbalance. So basically, something that is not in balance with your fellow man or your community or society.
Okay. Mr. James, what about you? What's your take on what is toxic or toxicity?
In my opinion, toxic or toxicity changes the energy in the room. It changes the temperature of the room. Like a toxic presence, even non-verbal presence. Some people can enter the room and it's not aligned with goodness. And so I would say, I don't know, I guess that would be like an adjective to describe it. I don't know if it's a definition, but yeah.
Okay.
And so can I pop in and say,
that's a good word, Elder.
Something else maybe like I can say is something that's detrimental to community. You know what I'm saying? That harms the sense of community as opposed to facilitates the sense of community.
Okay.
I agree.
I agree with that.
I like the fact that Watt is including more than a single person. I think a lot of people think of toxicity in a narcissistic way, as if you're toxic if you affect me negatively. That's what everyone is thinking when they say, "Oh, that's a toxic person. I need to stay away from them." it's not necessarily that's a toxic person, you know, they're not doing something for their community or for the world at large. And if someone is toxic to you and they're not toxic to the world at large, maybe you're the one who's toxic. because if they don't affect the community negatively, then maybe they shouldn't be affecting you negatively. That's just that made me think like that, because someone's toxicity is not going to be based on one single person. That's what Waz's statement made me just think of, and I thought that was cool.
Beacon, since everybody has kind of chimed in, what's your take?
Well, I was leaning more towards a literal definition, but in terms of like what Blue was just saying, I'm thinking of like the body, the actual physical body, and within the body, there's a system that's set up, you know, blood system, veins, you know, everything. And so something to me that's toxic is one, something that doesn't belong, and something that is like poisonous to the system, that breaks down the connection, the connectivity, the community, as Waz said. So it's something that's detrimental to the positive movement and flow of the way that the system could be, should be, that kind of thing.
Okay. I like that. James, did you have something that you wanted to chime in with?
Okay. No.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. All right. So Brandon,
Amen,
can you
James.
go ahead and kick us off with your question?
Yeah, so my question, one of them, and this was tough, man, but I think, and because I just mentioned something like this to a couple of y'all the other day, so that's why I think it's on my brain this way, is if I'm brave enough to ask the question to other people, my question would be, how do other people see me? How have I affected their lives? And just to give you some backstory on that, so when I was about 27, 28 years old, somehow like the conversation, it was kind of the culmination of conversations that I was having with like ex, you know, girlfriends and stuff that I had been dating. All of them told me one thing specifically, which was that I was very self-centered. And, you know, the whole time I'm like, man, I ain't self-centered. I'm a good dude. I'm nice. I care about everybody. And then I started to read a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which if you read that book, you know, it specifically defines and explains self-centeredness. And I was like, whoa, I am self-centered. And so other people were able to recognize that in me, but I wasn't. And so that enlightened me. So I think one thing that you have to do if you're trying to determine toxic masculinity in your life, one thing you're going to want to do is to reach out to other people and see how they see you, because it's probably very different from how you see yourself.
Yeah.
Can I just touch on something that he just hit me with just now? I might not have even known it. Being that, you know, a lot of us are involved in the entertainment business, and what he just said highlights the importance of not just having yes men as friends.
Amen.
As dealing with people who will check you, you know. There's so many people that I see people on both ends of the spectrum. There's people who only have people who are yes men around them, and I see how their characters end up. And then I have people who only have tell it like it is people around them. I see how their characters are different. And if you're the person who only has the yes men around you and you reach out to the people in your circle, it's not going to help you. It's going to be completely, it's going to reinforce whatever you believe that's good about yourself, because that's what their purpose in your life is. And you've set it up that way. So you need to make sure you have a circle of honest people, or you need to go outside your circle and find out why they're outside. To find out, you know, I know I got a bunch of yes men around me. I know that these people are just going to tell me what they, think I want to hear. Let me talk to some people who don't come around as much, who've been around here, who I don't see very often. Let me see what they think and why they don't come. I'm just saying that might be a way to go if your whole circle is people that won't tell you the truth.
And that's, you know what, that makes me think of something I had an epiphany about before. Like, there's people, you can be like a generally good person and then have a moment of toxicity, or, you know, where you're going on like, you know, a month or a week or something like that, where you're just indulging in all these bad habits or whatever, right? And what I tell people is, it's okay to have those moments, but when you come out of it, remember who was encouraging you in your toxic behavior and cut those people off. Whoever was helping you, whoever was facilitating and cheering you on in your toxicity or whatever it was, you need to cut those people off when you come out of it. Those people have to go away because they're not having your best interests at heart. They're not going to help you become who you want to be and have a healthy life and a happy life.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an important idea. Just adding on to that is, a lot of people think that growth is about cutting out bad behaviors. It's also about cutting out negative and bad people too. The people who pull you down into those behaviors. So that's an awesome point that Y mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody who wants to go next?
Let me just add something else that just hit me on the head.
All right.
There may be times when there's a certain type of person that is toxic to you, or a certain type of person that you're toxic to. It's like not every plant is poison ivy for you, But there's some people who, if you get around those people, it takes you to a place because of maybe your own propensities towards certain things. It takes you to a place, maybe because of associations or whatever, that union, that person is not necessarily a toxic person. They're good for the community. They're good in a lot of ways. But your chemistry with them is a toxic blend of chemicals. And sometimes, like I was actually talking to Trey yesterday, and I was talking about something Pastor Kelly at Rubidoux Seventh-day Adventist Church. He said on a live, and he said there were 72 disciples. First of all, I had never even heard that before. There's 72 disciples, but there were 12 that were closer than there's 72 people who followed Jesus around. Right. And then he said there were 12 that we call the disciples because we know about them because he interacted with them every day. And then of the 12, there was 3 that he dealt with even closer than the others. When he had to go pray or when he had to go do a specific thing, he'd say, these 3 guys come with me. And he said a lot of people, some people who are in your 3 should be in your 72. Some people who are in your 72 should be in your 12. And this is how and some of that has to do with the blend of personalities that you have with certain people, because, after all, chemistry and personality does play a part in our interaction with other people and how it affects us and them. So that might be, there might be specifically toxic relationships that don't make them a toxic person.
Can I give an example of that? Sure. Using somebody on here, I'm going to talk about Joaquin for a minute. In a positive way. When I met Joaquin through Trey, and we were primarily friends on Facebook. And some of the stuff now this was kind of like pre-transition, floating Joaquin. And he would say some things on Facebook that I would be like, who does smart think he, I'd be like, this dude, somebody need to roll up on his cat. So one day he posted something specifically though about I think it was about single fathers or about fathers like not being in their child's lives, and I was very offended by it. I actually deleted him as a friend. But the truth was, the reason I deleted him as a friend was because I felt convicted by his statement. Wow. Because at that period in my life, I wasn't really where I was supposed to be with my son. And since then things have changed. My son lives with me now. We have a much better relationship. But I think that's an example of somebody who I would say was in my 72. You know what I mean? And so what God specifically showed me through Joaquin was to dig in. When you feel that thing cutting at you, dig in rather than run like many of us will do. We'll cut cord and just jet off. God told me specifically, even with him, to just dig in and see that this brother has wisdom that speaks to. Now that's a moment where I was the one who was displaying toxic activity in my life through my relationship with my child, but I had somebody who was an example to me, who was showing me a better way. And prior to that, normally I would have run from that. But in this case, by staying within a closer proximity, I was able to learn and gain wisdom and make a different decision. So I think that's just, for me, what you were talking about, Blue, that's an example of how, that was somebody who was further out proximity wise, but God told me dig in and get closer and learn something and grow from it. And that's exactly what I was able to do. So it enhanced my life. You know what I mean? And that's why it's important to really analyze the positions that you have people placed in.
Wow. Because, again, about looking at toxicity from a narcissistic standpoint, a lot of people feel like anything that rubs them the wrong way.
Yeah.
That's the definition of toxic for some people. Like, I don't feel like you should be approaching me like that. So you're toxic, right? But even from a biblical standpoint, you learn a lot about a person's character and your own character by how you respond to rebuke. Is the person correct? Have you even, are they right? Have you considered that they may have a point? Do you respect their mind enough to say, well, if they have that to say, it came from somewhere. Let me stop for a second and see if that's rubbing me the wrong way for a good reason. And not to write that off as toxic just because you have a negative emotional reaction, because we just use these words positive and negative. And rebuke always produces a negative feeling, but for your good. So is it a negative thing to feel a negative emotion? Not necessarily. So we need to not write people off so quickly as toxic when you have a negative reaction to what they say or do.
But in order to get there, I think that one has to be self-aware. At the core of this is self-awareness.
Yeah.
And not all human beings are self-aware and able to stand back with, reason and practicality and say, did I do the best? Did I handle this situation better? Could I have done this differently? So self-awareness is core to not being, or key to not being toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was going to say, how we're kind of going like person by person to ask questions. I feel like there's some questions that are being unearthed as we're having this talk right now. That might be one of them, right? How do I respond to criticism?
Right.
Like, do I look at myself? Like, do I, because I don't like to objectively or subjectively say this thing is bad, this thing is good. Violence is bad, right? But that violence is bad depending on the circumstances.
Absolutely.
But if you're trying to harm my family and I need to defend myself, violence is not a bad thing in my opinion, right? So it's not about the response, it's about whether your response is appropriate. And you can only figure out if it's appropriate if you're doing some introspection and really looking at yourself and looking at the situation and saying, okay, does that make sense, right? So how do you respond to criticism? Are you even looking at yourself when you're criticized to see if that criticism is warranted? If the statement is warranted, because if it's not, you can be offended. That's fine or whatever, right? If you look at yourself and say they're wrong, they're just saying some bullshit to me or whatever, then it's whatever. But taking the time to actually look first is like a really important thing.
So is criticism like a early indicator that you may have some toxic traits? Or
I don't think so. I think criticism is just a natural human trait. We judge each other. We just do. We just, it's just part of being a human being. It's something that we have to actively work against doing. And my definition of judgment is probably a lot different than other people's definition. Also, I don't think making an observation is the same as judging someone.
Right.
I think it's when you're adding importance to the observation that you're judging someone. When you're making your observation mean something about that person, that's when you're judging a person.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my definition of judging, is not just making an observation, but giving that observation some type of weight. So I would say, but we observe each other all the time. We have observation natural. It's a natural reflex of our mind. When you're walking down the street and you see somebody dressed a certain way, your brain automatically has these predispositions about who that person is. It's going to tell you all this story about who this person is. That person is this, they're a Republican,
right.
They whatever. It's going to give you all this information that's all make-believe. You don't know anything about that person, but it's a fight or flight response reflex. You have to be making these judgments about your surroundings all the time. It's just a natural thing.
Right.
So I don't think criticism is necessarily an indication that you're automatically toxic. Now, if you're getting an overwhelming amount of criticism, people are always saying you're,
and it's the same one.
Right. Yeah. Then you might want to start to, maybe it's me. You know what I'm saying?
Any other questions? You got a question for us, Jane?
I had one, but I'm gonna scrap that.
So you don't want
to scrap it right on the broadcast.
All right, what about you, Blue?
I think mine is two questions, but it's because the one question begs the second one, and it's okay. So a little backstory on this: like, I didn't know that I was known for knowing whether a person was full of BS or not in college until recently. Like, my friends told me, yeah, like if you said, like if at first glance you saw somebody, was like, nah, he ain't. They were like, we just knew sometime it was gonna come out. I was like, I didn't even know I was seen that way. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, what was I looking at? Like, how did I? Is it just intuition, or was there a specific thing that I was looking at and said that thing, you know? And I think a lot of it was what excites them. I think a way to find out if you're toxic or not is what excites you and why. And the other way to look at it is what upsets you and why, what disgusts you and why. What excites a person will tell you pretty much everything you need to know about them. What they look at and have a positive emotion from, you know, Hitler would look at the death of anyone who's not Aryan and get excited because that's what he thought was a good thing, right? And it tells you a lot about a person to get excited about something like that. And, you know, when do they light up? Like, what makes them tick? When you enter a conversation with them, do they like altercations? When they find a time to tear someone down, do you see a glow in them? Like, there's some people who get excited about things like that. And it's like, okay, you know, you're at the core of this person's character, and you're trying to, what is it about you that makes you feel like you need to do that? Is it just...
Yeah, you know what? I think this is actually a perfect thing to bring up with this situation that we have right now with Trump coming out and saying, you know, him and his wife have like coronavirus or whatever. Like, I saw a lot of people celebrating this dude getting sick and like actually hoping he dies from this virus.
Right.
It was like really kind of jarring to me that nobody really realized how like twisted it was. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like this guy. Yeah. I'm more leaning towards dislike of this guy, which is rare for me to dislike somebody, right? Where I can say I really dislike this person. So I don't like this guy, but I don't wish harm on him. Like,
do you think that he's toxic?
I think he is absolutely toxic, and I think he would do the world a service by leaving office. But I am not celebrating him being harmed by a disease that makes your lungs stop working and does all this. I don't want to see anybody suffer. I can't celebrate. And I'm kind of indifferent to it. Like, it's kind of like poetic justice that this guy has been talking about this being a fake disease, China disease, is catching it or whatever. It's poetic justice, right? It's karma. But I'm not celebrating the karma coming home. That's I can't. It's not in my nature to celebrate harm of another being, regardless of who they were. So that's one thing for me.
And it's hard to filter that. That's why it's real good to watch that, because if you ask somebody a question, they're going to tell you their best version of the answer. They're prepared to some extent to say, well, this is how I feel about this. But what excites you happens immediately, and you don't really get a chance to filter that. And you can easily see what a person is drawn to, and what a person is drawn to or away from is what I think one of the truest methods of finding out about a character is unfiltered.
And I have one. What about, do I hold myself to the same standard that I hold others to?
Come on.
Because I see that a lot, all the time. Oh, and another, like, something next to that, a parallel, do I only hold people to standards that I'm proficient at?
Right.
So, like, you know, and those are two different things. They're very similar, but they're two different things. So the one is, I'm holding you to a standard that I'm not holding myself to. I expect you to operate in a way that I'm not, and I'm not looking at myself and making sure I'm doing the same thing. That's very important for me. because I practice that, even if I'm not around people, if nobody will ever find out if I didn't hold myself to the same standard, I still do. It doesn't matter who's around. That's how I've created integrity in my life, is because I hold myself to the same standards as other people. When I'm about to do something or shirk my responsibility or not, I could pick that paper up, but I'm not going to pick. I don't feel like it, right? This paper's on the ground on my property, and I don't feel like picking it up. Then I remember that I had a talk with one of my employees, and I told them that they should pick it up. And then I pick it up because I can't, in good conscience, not pick it up after I've already told you that that's the standard for us to operate by. So that's a thing for me, is to hold myself to the same standard that I hold other people to. And the other example I gave, I see a lot of people judging others based on their proficiencies. So like, I'm good at it, so now I can talk trash to you because you're not good at it. But I'm exceptionally good at this thing. What about judging? Are you judging yourself the same way? They're good at it and you're not good at something? Are you judging yourself the same way? Like that mentality of only judging people by your proficiencies is a really good way to end up being a toxic human being, because you're never going to see flaws in yourself. Everybody else is going to be judged as lesser than, because they're not operating on the same level as you in your specific proficient category.
You see that leans to self-reflection, and unfortunately, most people don't like what they see looking back at them when they look in the mirror. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, I just feel as though some people just get comfortable in that state, and or they get lazy, where they make the decision to choose not to make a change.
I think people would be a lot less afraid of introspection and looking at themselves if they learn not to judge themselves by what they see.
Okay.
I think the issue is that you're looking at, when you see this flaw or this unwanted trait, you're making it mean something about you, and that's a nasty. It doesn't feel good, and so you're avoiding that because you don't know how to handle that. That's another question. How do you respond to being uncomfortable? How do you respond to rejection? That sort of question.
See, now
I got another one.
Question is loaded. That's heavy.
Yeah. If y'all want to discuss that for a minute before I go into this other one, to let me know, because that was good.
Yeah. Let's sit here for just a second, and then you can go into that. Rejection on so many levels is especially today. You just see through the behavior, like on a child level, they don't know how to handle being told no. You know what I mean? Like, they don't get their way, they throwing tantrums or what have you. Oh, the kids don't like me or whatever. Like, we're seeing suicide numbers rise with adolescents and children. We seeing murders in school. Like, we all got picked on. We all encountered people, who got bullied, you know what I mean? But you had to roll with the punches, literally. But, you know what I mean? You kept it moving, but it gave you a thicker skin.
Yeah.
It taught you how to deal with rejection. Life ain't easy. You're going to get hit with stuff at times that you may not be ready for, but you got to know how to address it.
I don't honestly think we did learn how to address it. I think we learned how to suffer through it. I don't, because there's a lot of grown people. I don't think this is even a generational thing. There's a lot of grown adult men, they're not even kids, that if they try to talk to a female or get her number or whatever, and she doesn't give them attention, then they throw tantrums too. These are grown adults. This isn't like this generation. This is like a thing that's been around. You know what I mean?
Okay, so that was actually about to be the second point that I brought up. But I do think that's different, because you learning how to interact in a societal, multi-sexual environment is different than it was a little different than your one-on-one interactions. At least I feel is a little different than your one-on-one interactions with the person that you're attracted to or trying to deal with. Now, I agree with you 100%. Yes, men get rejected and they lose their mind. And I mean, we got a whole TV network that is dedicated to that. Lifetime, ID, you know what I mean? Like, you see it all, you know what I mean? Because men can't control themselves and don't understand how to handle rejection. But like I said, I think that type of rejection is a little bit different than like what you see with kids, or if you apply for a job and get rejected. I just think the degree.
I honestly don't think it's that different. It's
okay.
It's really about entitlement and attachment to the outcome of these things you're pursuing. It doesn't matter.
It's not different because it elicits the same exact emotion in you. No matter how you're rejected, it elicits the same cocktail of chemicals in your blood, and it feels the same way. How dare you that, the how dare you feeling of, I put myself out there and I was rejected. It feels the same no matter if it's your parents saying no or some girl or a job or anything. It's the same emotion.
Yeah, and I think so when we in spirituality, we practice this like where we try to walk back to the root of the thing. Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about is this being not knowing how to handle rejection. When we're walking back from there, what we're really talking about is not knowing how to handle the negative emotion that rejection produces.
Right.
We're not really talking about the rejection itself. We're talking about the aftermath of the rejection that men can't handle. It's or people in general can't handle. It's their response to the negative emotion that's the issue. They're not processing the negative emotion in a healthy manner because we're not taught to do so in our society. That's not something that we learn about in school. We learn about how to make a lot of money. We learn about patriotism, they say the Pledge of Allegiance and all these things, but we don't talk about emotional aptitude. And it's something that to the detriment of the entire society, because now that's the root of toxic masculinity and all this stuff. That's the root of all that stuff. It's just not being emotionally intelligent. You don't know how to respond to negative feedback.
Where are you supposed to learn that? Like who should be teaching you that?
Your mom and your daddy.
Okay. That was pretty on the nose. Okay. Since a lot of people are not getting that outside of the house.
Oh, you gonna learn today.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say.
If you don't have yes men in your circle, if your mom and daddy failed, men will take their place.
Jesus.
It's a free show.
Right?
Brandon, exactly. I heard
that. Yeah. And again, it's not really about who's supposed to it's not really about who's supposed to be teaching this. Mm-hmm. If I don't know it, how am I going to teach it to my son, right? If I don't know it, how am I going to be responsible for teaching it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not really about who's supposed to. It's really about just who found out, who woke up. I didn't know about this stuff when I was a kid, and I had a spiritual awakening, and I learned about the human condition, right? So now that I know, this is why I have these discussions. This is why we have this show. So when we talk about these things, just because, and I don't feel obligated to do so. It's just my nature now to discuss human nature with people. So I don't think there's anybody who's supposed to do it. It's just who's in a position. And
you just touched on something that is really important in this conversation and can easily get overlooked, which is the silver lining, which is nature can change. If you do find yourself to be toxic or toxic in a certain way or toxic to a certain person, these things can be overcome. That's only the first step to alleviating a problem or a potential problem. So natures can change. You can change who you are at your core in different ways.
Brandon, what were you going to say?
Yeah, to both points, I think that it is our responsibility to, what they say, each one teach one. When you know better, you do better, but you also help other people to do better. I'm not going to be able to remember this and say it with the same kind of flair that Bluetooth said, but you said something, Bluetooth, several episodes ago about when you have a talent and you give it to the world. You remember that? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We see that in the book of Proverbs. When you have that information, your job is to share it. When you read in, I want to say it's 2 Peter, 4 or 3 through 9, somewhere in there, it talks about this growth of spiritual maturity. And the very last step, now you would think that the last step would just be to know God and have a relationship with God. It's not. The last step, you're supposed to, as you go through this process, you know God, And through knowing God, you receive agape love. You get that feeling. You get to understand what agape love is. And then it tells you to love your brothers and your sisters and then love everyone. A part of loving everyone is you give them the truth, the truth of the knowledge that you've learned and that you've shared. So it is a part of our responsibility as men, mature men, not just as mature men, but especially as mature Black men, to share what we have and what we know now with those that we come into contact with, in the hopes that they grow and change and come to recognize the truth about themselves like we have about ourselves. And so much of this stuff starts, it's tricky because so much of this stuff starts when you're a child. And you know, we're born with this sin nature, we're disconnected from God. And what we do is we create these false narratives, these false selves that we identify with those, so that they become barriers of protection around us as we live our lives. And that stuff becomes so ingrained in us. I didn't start to make these changes in my life till I was 30. So, 25 plus years of creating a narrative and living as someone else completely. It was so hard to identify that stuff. I wouldn't have done that without a knowledge of God and seeing that. So for so long, I thought it was just me. And what I do is what I do, and you just got to be happy with it. But then I see something greater, better, more pure, more loving, more peaceful, and I'm like, I'm nowhere near that. You know what I'm saying? So it was God awareness for me that helped create self-awareness, so that I could begin to make changes.
I like that.
Whoa.
That
Okay.
was powerful.
That's gonna end up on a Kingdom Cruise.
Okay.
Submerged.
Might as well.
God awareness, so I can recognize self-awareness.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Can I hit you with it now?
Let's go.
When there is conflict in your life, what does the end result look like? When there's conflict between you and a person in your life, how does your relationship look after said conflict? If you are closer as a result of those things, then that's not a toxic way of doing things. If there's true resolution, a lot of times those things make you closer. And many times those are the things that make relationships closer, because there was resolution to a conflict and you really see where a person's coming from. Are you able to do that? If you look at all your conflict and you see that there is no relationship on the other side of it, then you might be a toxic person. Because in a conflict, everyone's objective should be resolution. How can we get to the other side of this better than we were when we started to make this conflict worth something? Right? That's how it should be looked at. Just like an argument should be two people trying to arrive at the truth, not each person trying to convey their point and bring the other to where they are. A lot of times, like I always say, the truth is in the middle. No extreme is the place to be. It's somewhere in the middle, no matter what it is. And there's a whole lot more in the middle than there is at extremes. And a lot of times it takes discussions like arguments to come up with what the middle is, and that's the purpose of an argument to me. Matter of fact, I've been at the beginning of an argument before and just said, whoa, are you willing for your mind to be changed? Because I'm wasting my time if you're not. I'm willing for my mind to be changed. You just have to actually convince me. It's not that I'm being a jerk or I just don't want to change. It's that I haven't been presented with the thing that would change my mind yet. But there is a thing. And if you present me with that thing, my mind is going to change. Are you willing for your mind to be changed? And if they say no, dap you up and let's not waste each other's time. So, conflict resolution, is that a thing in your life, or do conflicts usually end up as the lack of a relationship? I remember a time like my own rebuke came in a situation where there was a misunderstanding with somebody I know who's very prominent, very successful. And he asked me to do something. And when he asked me to do it, I said, that's going to take me a minute, because there was a lot of things going on in my life that would affect the timeline as far as that thing was concerned. And because that person is who they are, I wanted to do it a certain way, right? So, but the problem with that was the timeline went long, right? So he felt like I wasn't gonna do it because of how long the timeline was. So he was upset by that, and he came back to me and we hashed it out and we talked about it. And I explained to him why it was taking so long and whatever. And he was like, he said one sentence. And he was just like, I'm a right now N-word, right? I'm a right now man. I'm a right now guy. He said, that's the reason I'm in the position that I'm in. And that's why I mentioned that he's very successful, because he said, that's why I'm in the position that I'm in. He said, because I'm a right now. Of course, there's a whole lot of things that accumulate to the position a person is in. But when he said that, I chose to look at it from a analytical perspective. Like, when he said, how does he mean that? because I was like, is there something, like, did it take long? Did it take that long because there was some, like, was there a contribution of procrastination in that? Even though I didn't feel like there was, and I said it would take a long time, but could it have happened earlier? You know, and when he said that, it was just like, and after he said that, it's just funny, the whole conversation, and of course we're closer because of the conversation, but still, that particular sentence kept ringing in my head. And I was like, I'm all right. So he was judging how long it took by his own thing. And the thing was, I thought about every time I've ever asked him for anything. As soon as he said that. And it was always immediate.
He did it immediately.
Every time. Yo, man, can you do so and so and so and so and so? It's done immediately. It always has been. So he wasn't being a hypocrite. He was telling me really what his trait really is. I've been able to see it firsthand. So of course he's going to think that was way too long. From his perspective, it is way too long. He would have done it faster. Whatever's going on in his life, because he's a right now kind of guy. And then I looked at different things about my life, and I was like, I'll be sitting here. I'll go to the kitchen, and this will still be here in my studio. I was going to the kitchen. Why not take it with me? You know, like even little stuff like that. Like, I went there to take this, would have taken no effort at all. Later on, I'm going to be cleaning up, and I'm going to make an actual special trip to take this to the kitchen, because I didn't just do it when I thought of it or when I was done. I might have gone to the kitchen right after I ate. Why didn't I just do it then? And I just thought about that in every area of my life, and I became a right now guy because he said that. And guess what? My whole life is better because of that. Because of that one thing. I made changes in my life to make it more likely for me to do things at once. Now my studio is across the hall from my bedroom. I don't have another building that I go to for my studio because I can do it right now. See what I'm saying? So whole lifestyle changes were made because I want to be more of a right now person, because I saw somebody's example, not just what they said, but I saw their example of what they said, and I could not find it within myself to argue with that because I had too much evidence. So I changed that in myself, and it's a better life because of it.
Wow. Okay.
Amen.
Amen. Right. Like, I don't know what I was expecting today.
That's an organ right
like,
there.
I really don't know what I was expecting, but I knew it was going to be good. And I'm just enjoying this conversation so much. I kind of feel like our EP today, you know, while she just sits back every show and just has the opportunity to just watch as it's happening. But like, I'm so engrossed and captivated, man. Like, this is if you ain't helped from this, if somebody ain't got something,
that's a question
from
you need to ask yourself. Did this discussion help me? If not, you're a toxic person.
If I am watching an episode about being toxic and I get nothing from it, I might be a toxic person.
Right.
Oh man.
You know what? That makes me think of another question too. What do I want for myself?
Yeah.
Like, what are my goals? Like, are they just materialistic? Are they things that are going to bring joy to the life of myself and others? You know, what are the things I'm aspiring to? Are those healthy things? Like, am I aspiring to toxic things? Like, you know what I mean? That might be an indication of you being toxic also.
I think a way to find that out is who is affected by your dreams and how. Like, Do you want your dreams because they will bring you money? And for that reason only. You'll be more successful, as you know, the word successful is defined by society, which I would define differently. But, you know, is it based on gaining something, or is it based upon making a contribution? I feel like a goal of life should have to do with the contribution that you intend to make to the world, to everyone around you. When you think of your goals, the first thing you should preface that with is, what does my blend of traits, skills, and talents enable me to contribute to the world? And how big can I do that? Because
Hey, Blue, you might have to first self-identify what your skills, talents, and traits are before you can even get to that
it might make you have to go back and do some homework, but at the end of the day, you're going to need to do it, because this is about purpose. This is about why you exist. You know, everyone needs that. You can't get around that. You know, why do I have these traits? Why do I have these abilities? Why do I have these thoughts? Why do I have, you know, these people who are drawn, this kind of person is often drawn to me? Why? You know, who am I here to serve? And the thing is, money and all these things are byproducts. They're not products. Money is not a product. Money is a byproduct of providing value. So if you provide the value that you're here to provide, the money will come because someone will want it enough to pay for it. Right?
And Blue, and that's something when I was talking about earlier, looking for ways to provide value in the lives of my fellow man, that's one of the reasons. You know, I think a lot of times, because people think of me like spiritual and I'm called like the R&B monk or whatever, that they think I don't have any selfish pursuits. Like much of what I do is selfish. I help you guys out because the more I help you out, the more God gives me. The more I'm willing to disseminate the information, the more information I'll receive. That's why the book's called Messages to Self. I realized early on that the more I was willing to pass on the information, the more information I was being given. It works the same with money. The more money I give out, the more money I get in. It's the way the system is set up to work.
The more you
right?
teach, the more you learn.
I don't want people to think that I'm only this like magnanimous person or whatever. I have selfish pursuits of my own also. So yeah, a lot of what you're talking about is really adding value. And when you're talking about you want to make $1 million, the way I frame that in my brain, if I say I want to make $1 million, instead of saying I want $1 million, I immediately begin looking for ways to add $1 million worth of value back into the system.
That's how you're gonna get it anyway.
You know what I mean?
And that it's just an error of thinking to think any other way. But there's no other way to get $1 million except unless somebody leaves it to you, and you can't plan for someone to leave it to you. If it has to do with your effort, it's going to be value that you place in the world from you. And everyone knows that value came from you, so they know where to send that money to.
Right.
Yeah, and there's a book online called I think it's called The Science of Getting Rich. And basically what the guy says is, when you tell the universe or God or whoever you're talking to, when you say, hey, I want to make $1 million, right? Then God sends the guy, starts putting things in motion to where the guy with the $1 million check starts heading towards you from China or whatever, right? But when he shows up with the check, you have to have something to exchange, something of value to exchange for the money. You don't just get the money. While this guy's on his way from China to America, you have to be building value to make you worthy of receiving the check. It's an exchange. It's not you just have your hand out and God drops $1 million in your hand. You have to be creating value equivalent to what you're receiving, equivalent or more than what you're receiving. Right. And I think that's where people fumble. They ask for things from God, and then they don't start working on themselves to create the value, equivalent to what they're asking for.
I would even say it's always more. No matter how rich a person is, their contribution or what they've done or effort that they've given is more usually than what they've received. Because if you quantify the effort of people who make it, when Jim Carrey and other very famous people were living in their cars and getting rejected every day at auditions. Like their way of life was getting rejected. Like most people that you see that are famous and that have what a lot of these people who think superficially about this want aren't the people who thought superficially about this, because if they do, they never would have made it because they had the thing of value so long before the value was actually paid for in money that they would have been discouraged if they weren't fixated on, but this is my purpose and this is why I exist. I have to do this thing. This is not an option for me. Failure is not an option because it would be failure to be me, because it's really who they are. Look at Jim Carrey and tell me he's not supposed to be a comedian. He's supposed to be a comedian. If he had done anything else with his life, it would have been because he didn't have the fortitude to be who he is. It might have been because he had a false goal, like a goal of money, because if money doesn't come fast enough, and the other danger of having money as a goal is it can come from somewhere else. So if the $1 million you want comes from something that is not your purpose, you're satisfied and you go in that direction, but you still don't do what you were put on the earth to do. So, all money ain't good money or those type of things. Well, even if you do get it from somewhere else, would you continue in your purpose that you've identified and learned for yourself to the point where you've ingrained it in your personality to go toward that thing that gives the world a reason to have you in it? That should be your focus. All the money in the world comes from that. And if you look from really successful people, a lot of times don't care about money. They didn't do it for money. And if they lost all their money, they do it again. I know even Dr. Dre's an example. He lost everything when he left Death Row. And then he started Aftermath and did the whole thing again, because it really doesn't matter how many times he has to do it, because it didn't happen because of a series of events. It happened because of who he is and his relentlessness about living within his purpose and the value that he was able to bring within that purpose, because he spent all his mental energy and all his time on that one thing. And it led him again to the same place. Every time he tries, he's going to end up at the same place because it's who he is. It's not luck. It's not he just ran into if he didn't run into that person, he would have ran into somebody else. If he didn't have Snoop, he would have had some other guy that we know of now because they got together. He was going to do that. So to turn yourself into a person who's going to do it is to identify the thing in you that brings that kind of value to the world around you, put some passion on it, and be relentless about it.
I'm with it.
That's a gem right there, boy. That's a gem.
It's the recipe, man. That's important what you just said. We're gonna go back and those three steps you just said, I think are going to be very important. That's an important snippet for us to really, I think, focus on. That's going to be important.
Episode. If you were not touched, moved, inspired, made
toxic.
You look at yourself, you toxic. Exactly. You are toxic.
You toxic.
Hey, Trey, I wanna kind of jump in a little bit on what Blue was saying, and in reference to the criticism thing. I think it's very important with criticism that you have to be aware of the source of the criticism, because there are a lot of people who will quote unquote give constructive criticism who haven't constructed anything.
Oh, okay.
Now that's a critical. Whoa. There are a lot of people, and so beware of the source. I'm not saying that. Somebody may say, "Well, I don't like the way you built that house or whatever." Well, have you built a house before? Do you know what it goes into, the foundation? Do you know what? Like, be careful of the source of the criticism. I will say that. Absolutely.
That's why I could not discount what this person was saying. I couldn't. I wouldn't. I would not respect my own intellect if I would have discounted what he said, because I know his life. I'm around him all the time. I see that what he's saying is true, and I see where it got him. How stupid would I be to be like, nah, that ain't got nothing to do. He told me that's why. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you do. If you don't do it when you're supposed to do it, you miss it. So how many opportunities would he have missed to be the person that I know him as if he hadn't have been a right now guy? I'll never know, and I'll never want to know because he wouldn't be in my life. He wouldn't have impacted the world the way that he would have. And I'm in a position where I want to impact the world the way that he did. So how dumb would I be not to listen to him? Again, how smart would I be to listen to somebody who has no track record whatsoever of doing anything who says something like that to me? Maybe that's not the person I need to be listening to. However, if you do find someone who has no track record that you know of and they say a thing that's true, it's still true. There are some things that they can tell you that you know they don't know nothing about it, and you do. In those situations, of the two of you, you should trust yourself. If you have expertise in a place that someone else doesn't, and you're unsure whether either of you is right, go with you until you find someone better than you.
Yeah.
You know, and I believe that's what James is saying. But,
yeah,
you know, if a person's track record speaks a certain way, come on, man, don't be stupid and don't be so narcissistic to think that whatever you think is right because you're you. Like, nothing happens because you're you. Everything happens because it's either true or not.
Right.
So consider the source is a huge thing. It's like when your mother tells you something, she would never tell me anything so that something bad would come to me. So even though you might not agree with something, it's a person who you know would never tell you any. She could be wrong, but you know that her intentions are in a place where you have to at least consider it.
She's always on your team. Always.
You would be foolish not. She could be on your team and wrong, but but she could be sincere and be sincerely wrong, right? But you need to go through the process of taking what she said into account and standing it up against scrutiny and thinking about it. You should give that more thought than you give someone who could not have your best interest at heart, and you don't know where their interests lie. That's the person you know where their interests lie. So think about whatever they say, at least. Like, these are things like, you're a toxic person if someone who you know loves you tells you something and you immediately dismiss it.
Right.
Why would you immediately dismiss it? No matter what it is, immediately, you know, they should get a chance. Whatever they say should get a chance. I'm not saying believe whatever they say. You know, even my mom used to talk to me when I was a kid. She was like, look, I'm never going to say anything to intentionally hurt you or intentionally do wrong to you. But as you get older, my opinion should go into a pot with everybody else's, and you should stir it up and find out what you think. Like, that's what my mother said. However, in that pot, everybody knows when they cook, it's different amounts of different things. It ain't a cup of everything, right? So what she says might be the main ingredient. What other people say is in there, but there's certain people with track record, people who love you, people who don't want any harm. You know what their intentions are. Those people should rise to the top and then filter down from there. But always give those people a chance. And if you don't, that's a toxic way of thinking.
Toxic.
No.
I think that's going to be a running gag in all of our shows now. Toxic.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring this episode of questions to a close. So thank you all for tuning in. I really do hope that you all got something from this. If you get any questions you have, hit us up. You know, the links are below for everything, every person, and most of their endeavors are also listed down there, and all their affiliate IGs, Facebook pages. So make sure you click on that, and be blessed and bless us. So thank you for tuning in this week. We'll talk to you next time. Yeah.